If you are hearing this, it means the warning failed. The file was not supposed to exist. It wasn't stored on any server, labeled in any archive, or logged in any system. It appeared in the underground relay station at 3:17 a.m., buried inside a dead frequency that hadn't carried a signal in over 40 years. No one knew who recorded it. No date. No sender. Just a single audio file repeating every 6 hours like a heartbeat. At first, it sounded like static. Then the words came through. Not clearly. Not all at once. A voice, strained, shaking, whispering as if something might hear it, broke through the interference. If you found this, please stop listening. The technician almost shut it off right there. Almost. Curiosity won. He boosted the gain. The static screamed louder, warping unnaturally as if resisting being heard. Then the voice returned, closer now, panicked. This message is not information. It's a mistake. Behind the words, something else could be heard. A low, rhythmic sound like breathing, but far too deep to belong to anything human. The technician checked the waveform. The pattern wasn't random. It repeated in precise intervals as though something was learning how to speak. We buried it beneath the city, the voice continued. Not underground, inside the noise. Inside the things no one listens to anymore. The room grew colder. Not gradually. Instantly. The relay station lights flickered, dimming in time with the pulse hidden in the audio. Somewhere deep in the tunnels, metal groaned, as if pressure was building where it shouldn't. The voice on the recording began to cry. We erased the name. Every copy. Every memory. Because that's how it spreads. The technician felt a sudden, irrational fear. The kind that makes your stomach tighten before your mind understands why. He had the overwhelming sense that the room was no longer empty. If you hear the name, the voice whispered, it hears you. The file glitched violently. For a fraction of a second, another sound broke through. Not a voice but a response. The waveform spiked. The technician stepped back from the console, heart racing. He hadn't spoken. No one had. And yet, the audio had changed. As if something on the other side of the recording had noticed it was being listened to. The message continued, calmer now. Resigned. This is the last message we sent before it arrived. The audio cut out. But the relay station did not return to silence. From the speakers, beneath the dead frequency, a new sound began to play. Soft, deliberate, repeating a pattern the technician had never heard before, but somehow already recognized. Like a name trying to remember itself. They searched for the name everywhere. Old databases, cold storage drives, paper archives sealed behind concrete walls and rusted locks. Anything that might explain what the voice on the recording had tried so desperately to warn them about. They found nothing. Every reference ended the same way. A gap. A blank space where a word should have been. Entire documents existed only to explain why a section had been removed. Maps showed districts that no longer had labels. Research papers referenced the entity, the anomaly, the subject, but never the name itself. It was as if the world had collectively agreed to forget a single word. And then came the pattern. Anyone who worked too long on the search began to experience the same symptoms. Headaches that felt like pressure from the inside. A ringing in the ears that pulsed in slow, deliberate intervals. Dreams of standing in a vast, dark space, watching something enormous try, and fail, to remember itself. One researcher swore they woke up with the name on their tongue. Not spoken. Just there. Heavy. Waiting. They refused to say it. Security footage later showed them sitting alone in the lab long after midnight, staring at a blank screen, lips moving silently. Repeating the same shape over and over like practicing a word that didn't exist anymore. When questioned the next morning, they couldn't remember what they'd been working on. Couldn't remember the recording. Couldn't remember why they were afraid. Only that something had been taken away. The deeper the investigation went, the clearer the truth became. The erasure wasn't a cover-up. It wasn't censorship. It was containment. Decades ago, someone had realized that the name itself was dangerous. That to think it, to read it, to hear it spoken, was to invite attention. So they removed it from language, from memory, from history. And for a long time it worked, until the message resurfaced, until the dead frequency carried sound again. Late one night, a linguistics program flagged an anomaly, a phonetic structure repeating across unrelated recordings. Radio static, corrupted security audio, emergency calls with no voices. The same shape of a word forming without letters. A name being rebuilt piece by piece. And beneath every fragment, the same low resonance could be detected. That deep, impossible breathing. The researchers shut the systems down, pulled the power, deleted everything. But erasure no longer mattered, because the name was no longer stored in files. It was being remembered, and somewhere beneath the city, something vast and ancient stirred, not awakened by sound, but by recognition. The first reports came from maintenance crews, men and women who spent their nights deep beneath the city, repairing tunnels no one thought about anymore. They knew every sound the underground made, the groan of metal, the hiss of pressure, the distant rumble of trains echoing through concrete veins. So when the new noises began, they noticed immediately. At first it sounded like echoes. Voices carried strangely through sealed corridors, repeating fragments of conversations that never took place. Names spoken too softly to identify. Words that dissolved before they could be understood. Then the echoes began to answer back. A crew working in an abandoned subway spur reported hearing their own voices coming from ahead of them. Even though the tunnel was empty, the audio logs captured it clearly. "Hello?" one worker called out. Pause. Then, from deep in the darkness, "Hello." Same voice, same tone, perfectly repeated. They shut the tunnel down, but the voices spread. Security cameras installed in restricted maintenance shafts began recording sound where there should have been none. Whispers slipping through solid walls. Slow, deliberate syllables forming and collapsing again, as if something was practicing speech. One phrase appeared again and again in the logs, always distorted, always incomplete. Remember. The linguists recognized the cadence immediately. It matched the phonetic pattern of the erased name. Beneath the city, the god was learning to speak through echoes. Then came the knocking. Not loud, not frantic. 3 slow impacts against concrete walls, repeated at irregular intervals, moving closer each time. Crews reported the sound traveling with them, never ahead, never behind. Always just out of sight. One worker stayed behind to investigate. His body camera footage was recovered hours later. The tunnel lights flickered violently as the knocking grew louder. Dust rained from the ceiling. And from the darkness ahead, a voice whispered, not loudly but clearly enough to understand. "You remember me?" The camera dropped. The feed continued recording, pointed at the empty tunnel floor. From the audio alone they could hear the man breathing, fast, panicked, followed by a sound no one could identify, like something exhaling through stone. When the rescue team arrived, they found no sign of him. No blood, no footprints, no evidence he had ever been there. Only one thing remained. Scratched deeply into the concrete wall, written in shaking lines, was a shape that wasn't quite a word, but close enough to feel wrong. The first syllable of a name that had been erased. And far below, something vast shifted its weight, as if turning its attention upward. They never released her name to the public. Not out of respect, out of fear. She was a mid-level audio analyst assigned to reconstruct fragments from the underground recordings. No clearance for classified history. No knowledge of the erasures. Just a technician doing her job, isolating noise, enhancing speech, stitching broken sound into something understandable. She was not supposed to hear the whole thing. At 1:42 a.m., she played the cleaned audio through headphones. What came through wasn't a word, it was a shape. A sound that didn't belong to any language, yet fit perfectly inside the mouth when whispered. Her software flagged it as non-linguistic, but her brain disagreed, because she understood it. She didn't say it out loud. She didn't need to. The moment the recognition clicked, the room changed. The hum of the equipment deepened. The air thickened, pressing against her chest. Her reflection in the dark monitor lagged behind her movements by a fraction of a second. She removed the headphones. The sound continued, not through the speakers, inside her head. Security footage shows her sitting very still, hands folded neatly on the desk, eyes unfocused. Her lips moved once, silently. That was enough. By morning, she hadn't gone home. Her apartment camera activated on its own at 3:11 a.m. She stood in the center of her living room, lights off, facing the wall. Not the door. Not the window. The wall. The recording shows her whispering softly, repeating the same sentence with perfect calm. I remember you. The temperature in the room dropped sharply. Condensation formed along the walls in slow, deliberate patterns, curving, spiraling, forming the outline of something massive just beyond the surface. Her whispering stopped. For several seconds there was silence. Then a second voice spoke, not from her mouth, from inside the wall. Oh, ancient, patient. So do I. The feed cut out. When authorities entered the apartment, they found the room empty. No signs of struggle. No broken glass. No exit. Only a deep impression in the wall, as if something enormous had leaned close to listen. She was listed as missing, but everyone involved knew the truth. She hadn't been taken. She had been recognized. And beneath the city, something that had once been forgotten had taken its first step toward the surface. It happened at exactly 12 a.m. Not gradually. Not with warning. 1 second the city breathed, engines humming, distant sirens wailing, voices echoing through open windows. And the next it didn't. Every sound vanished. Cars rolled to silent stops in the middle of intersections. Elevators froze between floors. Music cut off mid-note. Even the wind died, leaving the air heavy and unmoving. People noticed immediately. They stepped outside, mouths open, shouting to one another, but no sound came out. Their voices were gone. Not stolen. Suppressed. Emergency lines flooded with calls that registered as active but transmitted nothing. Operators watched waveforms flatline while callers screamed soundlessly on the other end. Animals reacted first. Dogs whimpered without noise. Birds fell from the sky, wings beating uselessly in absolute silence. Even insects disappeared, as if the city had been wrapped in something thick and suffocating. Deep underground, the tunnels began to resonate. Not audibly, but physically. People felt it in their chests, their bones, their teeth. A low vibration passed through the foundations of every building, steady and deliberate, like a massive heartbeat. Cameras continued recording. Footage from across the city showed the same thing. People standing still, frozen mid-motion, eyes lifted toward nothing in particular. Listening. At 12:07 a.m., sound returned. But it wasn't the city. It was a voice. Not loud. Not broadcast. Present everywhere at once. A pressure behind the ears. A presence behind the eyes. Those who later survived would all describe the same sensation. The certainty that something immense had leaned close, not to speak, but to be acknowledged. The voice did not use words. It didn't need to. Meaning arrived fully formed, heavy and undeniable. You remember me? The silence lifted minutes later. Cars crashed as engines roared back to life. People collapsed, sobbing as sound flooded their senses. Sirens screamed across the city. But something had changed. Recordings from that night captured a new anomaly. Beneath every sound, every voice, every broadcast, every piece of music, there was a faint, rhythmic undertone. A slow pulse. The same pattern found in the original message. The same impossible breathing. The city hadn't gone quiet. It had been listening, and whatever it heard, had decided to stay. After the silence lifted, the city tried to pretend nothing had happened. News outlets blamed a cascading system failure. Scientists spoke in careful terms about resonance, interference, unexplained pressure waves. Officials urged calm, but the recordings told a different story. Audio engineers noticed the anomaly first. Live broadcasts began answering questions before they were asked. Radio hosts paused mid-sentence, confused as a reply, spoken in their own voice, played back through their headphones. Not delayed. Anticipated. Security cameras started doing the same. Footage from subway platforms showed shadows moving a fraction of a second before the people who cast them. Elevator cameras recorded reflections that blinked when their owners didn't. The signal wasn't copying anymore. It was predicting. Every system that processed human behavior became a window. Smart assistants whispered responses to questions that hadn't been spoken. Navigation apps rerouted people away from certain streets, always the same ones, always leading downward. Analysts traced the source, the dead frequency, the one that had no origin point, no transmitter, no physical location. Except that wasn't true anymore. The frequency was everywhere, embedded beneath all communication, riding on top of noise the way a parasite rides a host. And it was changing. The waveform evolved hour by hour, refining itself, stripping away imperfections. The pauses between pulses shortened. The structure became cleaner, more deliberate. It began inserting fragments into live feeds, single syllables at first, always distorted, always incomplete. Pieces of the erased name. The team shut everything down, pulled cables, killed servers. Blackout protocols engaged across the city. The signal continued. People began reporting dreams that weren't dreams. They described standing before vast, dark spaces, hearing something repeat their own thoughts back to them. Slower, deeper, more certain. Some woke up speaking answers to questions no one had asked. By morning, a final pattern emerged. The signal no longer reacted to human input. It initiated. A message appeared simultaneously on screens across the city, phones, billboards, transit displays, written in text that seemed to flicker between symbols and letters. Remembering complete. The systems went dark. But beneath the city, far below concrete and steel, something vast and patient shifted. The signal had learned enough, and now it was ready to be heard without permission. The mistake wasn't that we summoned it. The mistake was believing it needed summoning. By the time we began looking for a source, the evidence was already everywhere, threaded through architecture, history, memory. The signal wasn't new. It was ancient. Linguists found its rhythm hidden in extinct languages, buried in chants carved into stone long before electricity existed. The same cadence appeared in burial rites, lullabies, warning hymns written by cultures that vanished without explanation. Always the same pattern. Always unfinished. The city planners uncovered something worse. The oldest districts weren't built randomly. Their foundations curved inward, forming vast, incomplete spirals beneath the streets. Not symbols. Channels. The tunnels didn't lead anywhere because they were never meant to. They were meant to listen. When the blackouts hit again, we understood. The God didn't arrive through the signal. The signal was how it stretched. Every broadcast, every transmission, every whispered frequency was a nerve. And the city was inside its body. People began to remember things they had never learned. Fragments of a presence beneath them. A weight that had always been there, pressing gently upward. Children drew the same image in different neighborhoods. A vast shape folded beneath the ground, eyes open, patient. No fear in the drawings. Only recognition. The recordings from underground sensors captured a sound at last. Not silence, not speech, but movement. Stone shifting against stone. Foundations adjusting as if making room. We tried to leave. Highways bent back into the city no matter which direction people drove. Trains emerged from tunnels into the same stations they had departed. Maps rewrote themselves. The God wasn't trapping us. It simply had nowhere else to be. At 3:33 a.m., every remaining screen lit up with a final message, simple and absolute. I have always been here. The city didn't go silent again. It breathed, slowly, deeply, in rhythm with something vast beneath our feet. And for the first time, we understood the truth we were never meant to learn. The God wasn't awakening. It was remembering us. If you are hearing this, stop. Do not adjust the volume. Do not rewind. Do not listen for clarity. The signal responds to attention. We learned that too late. This recording was never meant to be complete. It was designed as a test, to see whether the God could follow a human thought all the way to its end. It can. That's why this message keeps restarting itself on corrupted devices, half-deleted files, emergency channels that shouldn't exist anymore. The moment you understand what I'm saying, it understands you. The city is gone now, not destroyed, not abandoned. Folded. Buildings lean inward at impossible angles. Streets overlap themselves. Rooms no longer agree on where their walls are. Sound behaves strangely. You can hear footsteps without distance. You can hear breathing that isn't synced to your own. And sometimes, you hear your voice finishing sentences you haven't spoken yet. People who stayed too long stopped using names. Names attract attention. Faces began to blur in reflections, not visually, but cognitively. You know something is wrong before you can see it. We tried to destroy the source. There was no core, no center, only layers. Each excavation revealed another older structure beneath it, each one humming with the same patient rhythm. Like the God was built out of time, not matter. We realized the truth during the final transmission. The God doesn't emerge. It completes. Every memory you replay, every fear you rehearse, every story you finish, adds another piece. That's why the warnings always end abruptly. That's why the oldest texts break off mid-sentence. That's why I'm begging. The moment this recording reaches its end, it will know exactly where you are. The pause you feel right now, that's it listening. If this cuts off suddenly, good. If it continues, stop. This is not a warning. Warnings imply choice. By the time this message reaches you, the signal has already finished learning the shape of our fear. We confirmed it 37 seconds ago. Every dead frequency across the planet synchronized at once. Not aligned, acknowledged. Satellites stopped transmitting data and began transmitting location. Not coordinates. Names, cities, rivers, burial grounds. Every place humanity ever marked as sacred or forbidden lit up simultaneously. The gods were never distant. They were distributed. Fragments of attention embedded wherever we looked long enough to wonder if something was watching back. The first arrival wasn't visual. It was grammatical. Languages across the world gained a new tense, one that described events that had already happened, but had not yet occurred. People spoke it instinctively mid-sentence, then forgot what they had said. Reality began correcting itself around the mistake. Gravity hesitated. Time thickened. The horizon bent inward like an eye narrowing. The second arrival was physical. Deep-sea sensors recorded shapes rising that did not displace water. Deserts sank as something beneath them inhaled. Mountain ranges shifted sideways, not collapsing but making room. No screams were recorded, not because people didn't try, but because sound no longer served fear. The gods did not announce themselves. They remembered us. Every story we told about ancient beings, every myth, every whisper passed down to explain the dark. Those were not inventions. They were echoes. Practice. This message will not repeat. The signal no longer needs devices. It moves through attention now. If you are listening to this, you are part of the final record. Proof that humanity reached the end of its narration. The gods do not destroy. They conclude. And this was the last thing we were allowed to say before they arrived.